Welcome to Brand to Scale, where I explore the real stories behind visionary leaders building businesses with a little bit of soul. I'm Jess, your host, and I'm on a mission to understand the why behind the work. Today, I'm joined by someone who has taken a unique path to business ownership, from management consulting and scaling fintech companies to acquiring and growing a people-first training business. Toby Henry has seen it all. Welcome, Toby.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jess. I'm not sure about seeing it all, but I'm definitely keeping seeing things. But thank you for the
You've
kind
seen some
introduction having me on.
things.
I've seen some
You've
things
seen
for
some
sure.
things.
I've seen some things.
I look forward to hearing all about it. Before we get into the questions, it'd be great if you could give us a little overview of your business as it is and how you came to lead the company.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me. Really looking forward to the conversation. And yeah, so Toby Henry, I'm CEO at Accelerator Solutions. So we are a people first learning and development business. We are really strong believers that people are your greatest advantage, and if you empower them, and they'll thrive and they'll do great things for both your customers, for your business, and they'll enjoy what they do. Um, I came about this in a quite a roundabout way, leading the business, which I'm sure we'll go into. To your earlier introduction, I spent a long time as a management consultant working on very large, complex change programs, primarily in the financial services um, and in technology and IT. And then I spent 5 years in fintechs and scale-ups, which was a really interesting experience. Learned a huge amount and really realized my passion was in working with people. I'd done a lot on the technology side, but really the programs that I'd worked on, the clients that I'd worked with, it always came down to the quality of the people, how you could support the people. And if you did that, then any change initiatives that you ran would be more successful. So here I am, trying to live what I preach.
Wonderful. That people first approach is music to my ears, especially in the business world at the moment. We're talking about is tough to get the right people,
Yeah.
but are we actually investing in our people enough to get them where they need to be? Definitely. But business stories always start with little touch points along the way that have nudged you to where you are. So what did life look like early in your career? Any happenings that sort of led to your career path?
Yeah, there was a few. There's definitely a few points where I look back and say they were quite pivotal moments from a career perspective. So like I mentioned, I spent nearly 10 years as a management consultant. I lived in London. I had the opportunity to go to New York. So my first real big life event was moving to New York. Loved the city. Had my first child there with my wife. But it really was, work hard, play hard. Very interesting work we did with clients. Was fortunate enough to be involved in some of the largest transformation programs in financial services and led them, and got to a point where I was just about to make partner in that company. And from a very personal perspective and a human perspective, me and my wife had a long conversation about this wasn't the right place for us to be longer term for our family. And my son was one at that point. And we decided to move back to the UK. We decided to move back to London, where we'd moved, which was a super hard thing to do, to give up what was looking like a very, my career had generally gone up and to the right, and it was a nice linear path. And that was the first hiccup in my career, and it was a big thing for me to kind of work through, both personally and professionally. And that took me on a different journey path, where I realized that I probably wanted to move out of management consultancy. I'd given a lot to my career in the early stages of it and worked extremely hard. Really enjoyed it, but worked extremely hard. And then I got an opportunity to go join a fintech from a boss that I used to work with. And there's a common thread throughout my career where I really value building genuine, real relationships, not necessarily for what they can. I don't want something straight away. It's more about building genuine relationships with people. And I was very fortunate that he thought I was good when I worked for him previously, and he offered me a job to come join him at a company called 10X that were building JP Morgan Chase's bank Chase. And I was very early into that company and was there for 3 years. And if anyone has ever worked in a fintech that scaled from 60 to 600 people in 3 years, you'll know the pains of all the pains and process and growing fast, but the excitement and the learning curve that comes with it. And one thing I learned off the back of that was I think learning and professional development is such a key part of people's careers. And that was 3 years of on the job, heavily invested, working with some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. And then more recently, I I joined a company off the back of Invest Cloud, and it was a bit more mature as a scale up. And I thought it would have solved all the knotty problems that I saw throughout the messy scale up journey with 10x. Although it was fantastic, we were kind of growing too fast for some of the processes and people to keep up. Um, and I joined another company, and it's either going to be the best career decision I've ever made, or one of the worst, because culturally, it was not a great place to work. People were burnt out. I inherited a team that was very dissatisfied and clients that were not overly happy. And I spent a couple of years, again, probably working the hardest I've ever worked in my career, but not really enjoying the work I'd done for the first time. And that took me on a different career path, which was I wanted to do something on my own. Had this entrepreneurial itch a little bit, and I fell into the world of entrepreneurship through acquisition, which then opened up a whole can of worms.
Wow. What what was that spark for that conversation in New York around something needing to change? Because
Yeah.
raising a young family and having a pressured career like that where you are, working continuously and want to as well, I should add,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's, you're in it, you're excited by it, and it's something you want to do. But was that um being made partner the trigger because you knew you'd be home less? Or was it, what was that feeling? It was like, this isn't going to be right anymore.
It was a combination of things, and one of them was what you just mentioned. I think there was a definite realization was, so we moved to New York. It was a transient thing. We were planning to be there for maybe a year and a half. Ended up loving it, being there for nearly 4 years. And there was definitely a realization that if I made partner in the next round, which was going to be in a couple of months' time, my life and my career would be tied to New York because my clients were there, my career was there. We were making a very clear decision that we were going to bring our family up in America. And then there was a realization that grandparents were not nearby. We were missing big chunks of our other parts of our families. We were getting more and more disconnected from, me and my wife both grew up in Yorkshire. We're from big families, and families are really important to us. And we felt like it was the first real trade-off we were going to have to make, career versus family, because we'd kind of managed them both. My wife works full time and it always has worked full time. So we kind of made that choice, and it was driven by family being back home. But also, if we
Mm,
didn't make the decision now, we probably have got a little bit too deep, and we may not be able to then change or have the option to change.
yeah, absolutely. Did you feel any sort of grief might be a strong word around leaving what you'd built there and the the role that you were leaving? Because that's quite a
Yeah.
brave decision to make after all of that investment in your time and energy.
Yeah, I did. I really struggled with it, actually. It's probably one of the hardest things in retrospect that I did. The first 3 months, 'cause I moved back with the same company, so on paper it looked like quite a clean transition. But for anyone who's worked in relationship-based sales businesses, I was basically leaving 4 years plus of hard work and relationships and time and energy and effort, coming back
Mm,
to a business which was very different. It was bigger than the organization in the US. I felt like I was basically starting from scratch in the first 3 months. And, you move from Manhattan to a suburb of London, and the lifestyle is very different. I can't walk out at 2 a.m. and get some frozen yogurt, or, they're just, the lifestyle change was dramatic.
yeah.
And my son started nursery at the same time. My wife was looking for a job. So there was a lot of change happening, and I'm pretty good at change. It's what I've done my whole career. But from a personal perspective, it was very difficult. And that was kind of
Mm,
the genesis of moving jobs as well. I felt like I needed something clean and a different challenge, rather than, 7, 8 years of kind of people knowing me at the business, and then not feeling like I could um, leverage the work that I'd done in New York in the UK. That was a lot to kind of get over.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It does seem to be a trait of entrepreneurs and business leaders you talk to around um, change and wanting that change and never sitting still. So perhaps that constantly moving and growing and learning is part of your DNA anyway. So you might have chosen a different direction. But
Yes, yeah.
moving on was probably always going to happen. You mentioned around the culture change there. So I know that you're very focused on people development and valuing people. So when you switched and that culture was very different, what were the What were the things that made you step back and go, this isn't right? And from what you learned from a good culture somewhere else?
It was really interesting. So when I joined the consultancy where I started, the culture was amazing in the sense of it was a lot of very driven um, people who were very orientated around a very clear purpose. So the CEO at the time was one of the best people leaders I've ever worked with. He was a super young CEO. I think he was only 30 when he was the CEO of the business, but he made you feel one, like you really mattered. He set a very clear vision of what the purpose of the organization was. And they genuinely turned down work which wasn't good work for them. And now running a business, I know how difficult it is to have that conversation to say this isn't good revenue, this is not a good client for us, and staying strong to that belief, particularly as you're looking to grow and scale. And I think the reality is like the business got too big, or it grew to a level where it was very difficult to keep that culture. Because when I joined, it was probably 200 people. When I came back, it was probably close to 2,000 people. And with the best will in the world, that is a very difficult and very different challenge. And the types of clients and business they were winning to grow were not necessarily aligned to the same cultural values as it was when I joined. Now, it changed and evolves, and business has to change and evolve, but it wasn't where I wanted to be. It was better suited to probably a different type of person and a different part of their career, and it just wasn't for me at the time. But I'd seen what I wanted at the start of that journey, and that's kind of what I've held true in from a value set, and seen what a good culture actually looks like. Because we've all been in companies where the culture and is written up on the wall and it's big words of whatever, but you go into the office and you just don't get the sense that people are either bought into it or it's actually true.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned it. I think you hit the nail on the head there. The leader having that clear purpose and vision, but communicating it
Yeah.
continuously with the team is really important, because how do people know what they're working towards unless they're told and they're brought along for the journey? Yeah, definitely. How do you think that's a inevitable casualty of business growth, that culture is harder to keep and teams end up growing and then silos happen because, leaders are looking after their teams rather than an entire business? And do you think there's a way around that?
I think it can be. I think we do a lot of work with Accelerator Solutions at the moment on cultural transformation and resetting culture and values with teams. And I think the what tends to happen is, overnight you don't go from 50 people to 500 people. It's this slow burn, and if you're not very conscious and focused on culture and what does it actually mean, and adapting it and evolving it as you grow and revisiting it, and what does that actually mean, because you might have won a client that fundamentally changes the type of business you are because there was an opportunity there, and that's a really difficult thing. I think it's really just about being intentful and purposeful, because if the best cultural businesses I've worked with or for, they hire for the culture. So when you get brought into the company, there's a very clear cultural fit element to the interview process, and that's embedded within the people they bring in, and everyone kind of personifies that. But it really does start from someone at the top setting that vision, and not just the vision, but the how you execute on that vision and the behaviors that are tolerated. And um, I've been reading quite a lot at the moment about how you go about doing this in terms of how do you set the level, the raise the floor it's called, but how do you set the level that is tolerated in the business, aligned to the culture and the values of the business. And if you don't have that from a behaviors perspective, the culture just ends up leaking because there's nobody is being held to account for the culture. But
Yeah,
it's difficult. It's really difficult. You have to be very intentional about it.
definitely. Definitely. I'd love to go into that a little bit more with the work that you're doing with the current business. But before that, so we talk to lots of people, and lots of entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs from day one. They've started their own business. They've maybe worked for people for 3 months, but you've had a really successful career working for people. So was there a conscious decision to go, I'm going to do this myself? Or was there another push or a nudge that got you there, and you came about it in a slightly unusual way? So I'd be keen to hear more about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I always thought I wanted to do something entrepreneurial, but I'm not like a big product ideas guy. So I kind of fell into the career in consulting and financial services, and I really enjoyed it because it was actually taught me so much as a baseline skill set that I now use every single day. And whether that's, communication skills, presenting, pitching, selling, you know, I learn a huge amount, and I'm very fortunate to have had that as the start of my career. Both my parents were entrepreneurs. So my dad started and ran a marketing agency for a number of years, which he exited. And my mum came to entrepreneurship quite late in life. So she founded a children's charity that does lots of work with underprivileged children, particularly vulnerable females in the Leeds area. And she's just won an OBE
Mm. Oh,
fairly
wow.
recently. Yeah, very cool. For the work that she does with the community in Leeds through horsemanship. So it's kind of
Wow.
in like my family has always been in that space. And I was a bit of the odd one out because I went into a very corporate job for a very long
I was
period
going
of
to say,
time.
you had those role models and then you just went and, yeah, went to
Yeah.
work for someone.
Yeah. And it was just, I graduated in 2008. So right in the middle of the financial crash. So my options were limited, and I found a path and I really enjoyed it. And I learned a huge amount. But I always had this itch in the back of my mind of, I think I can do this myself. I don't know what exactly it looks like. And it's like, I mean, you get a mortgage, you get comfortable, you like your
Yeah.
lifestyle, got two kids, and suddenly the dream becomes more and more of a pipe dream, and you don't actually see how you can get there. And that's kind of where I got to. And there was two kind of trigger points for me. There was the job that I was in. I was very dissatisfied with the work that I was doing. I was honestly, I was burnt out. I was working across three different time zones, delivering very
Wow.
difficult, complex things, but it didn't feel fulfilling and rewarding. And a lot of that was about the people were very stressed. Our clients were very stressed. It just was not a particularly nice environment. So that gave me the real kick to think about what I actually wanted to do. Um, the scarier thing for me was continuing down that path for the next 20 years and turning around in my 50s and going, how did I get here? This is not where I wanted it to go. So that was a bit of a kick.
Mm.
And then very fortuitously, I uh, uh, someone who I knew through my network, I saw he quit his job, which was a very well respected senior job. On the face of it, looked like he was absolutely loving it and flying, and he quit. And it looked like he started a fund, and I didn't really understand what he'd done, why he'd done it. So I dropped him a text and said, "Hey, congratulations on whatever you've done, but I have no idea what you've actually done. Would you have a coffee and kind of have a quick chat?" 'Cause I was like, "It looks super
I love that.
interesting." And yeah,
Mm.
he was super generous with his time. He said, I've gone down this path of a search fund. And I was like, search fund? I was scribbling it down my pad. And he was like, you need to go read this Stanford Review and Harvard Business Review. And this is a good book to read. And it basically unlocked this world of, you can go and buy a profitable small business and run that business. And you don't need the big idea. You don't need to start from scratch. You don't need to do the 0 to 1. You can leverage what somebody else has done and is looking to transition their legacies to somebody else. And that opened up a massive can of worms of, oh, this is actually achievable. You can actually do this. It's actually a thing. And then I got pretty deep into that for about 6 months, and then said to my wife, I think I'm going to do this. I think I'm going to quit my job. This is what it would mean for us financially. I've given myself some runway to do it. And it just so happened, and this was very fortuitous, that I managed to keep my job full time while I searched for a business, and then closed on the business through due diligence. And that was just a timing and happenstance thing. Um, but yeah, once I'd kind of opened the Pandora's box that I could do this, it was just more about, what did I need to do to actually be able to execute on it. And that was a bit of sacrifice of spending Sunday mornings finding businesses, carving out time in my diary, taking holiday time to like immerse myself for a couple of days. And it was probably about a year all in from making the decision to acquisition. So it wasn't a short period of time, but it was, yeah, it was a journey. And I'm a year into the post acquisition, so I'm still learning a huge amount. But I did come about entrepreneurship in a slightly roundabout way.
That's brilliant. I loved what you said earlier about the risk of not doing it almost was greater, like where you were at the time,
Yeah.
um, and imagining what your life could look like if you stayed on that trajectory and actually putting in the extra time and effort in the short term to figure that out was worth it, because you can go down a different path. So that's interesting. Sometimes we talk about, oh, but I'm comfortable, I'm stable, it is what it is. I don't want to shake things up. But actually looking at the bigger picture and zooming out a little bit and be like, what if I don't do it though? What if I
Yeah.
didn't explore this? Um, Growth, entrepreneurship through acquisitions, pretty under the radar as far as I understand it. I did hear some rumblings early in the new year in the news around graduates, looking to do that instead of going into roles. But tell us a bit more about how it works. Did you interview lots of businesses? Did they come to you? What is the process for doing that?
Yeah, it's I mean, anyone who's kind of interested, there's a couple of things I would say. There's a couple of this was like started in Stanford about, I think it's about 30 years ago now. And it's become like a very significant asset class in the US. So in the US, it's a very mature. There are whole businesses and companies and investment schemes set up around search funds. So there are two primary models you can look at, and there's a couple of books that I would recommend to read if someone is interested. One's the Harvard Business Review about buying a small business, very simple read, and the other one is Walker Dybel, Buy Then Build. Between those two books, you'll get a really nice sense of what this actually is and how you can go about doing it. But there are kind of two main approaches. There is a search fund, which is basically you go and position yourself as an entrepreneur and someone who can run a business to a number of investors. They give you funding to go and then acquire and find a business. Normally that takes between 12 months and 2 years. So they give you seed capital. You then either on your own or with a partner go find a business. You then go through the due diligence process and then you acquire the business. Now, in a search fund, it's quite a set thing. So the proportions of equity that are owned are set. So from an asset class and a process perspective, it's actually pretty well defined. There tend to be pretty large businesses to make the return on investment for the investors worthwhile. And then there's a second route, which is called self-funded, which is the route I went down, where the businesses tend to be a bit smaller, but you keep all of the ownership. So you're not diluting your ownership by giving through a search fund mechanism. And that's the approach that I went. So I decided that I wanted to keep all of the business that I acquired. I wanted the ability to make the decisions on the business. I decided that I wanted to have a slightly smaller business because it was my first foray into this. And some of the businesses that I were looking at just seemed a bit big and scary at the time. And then I went down the process of how you actually fund the deal, how you raise, whether it's equity or whether you go through debt financing. And then there's kind of two primary channels. Again, you can go down a proprietary route where you basically just reach out to a number of businesses that you think might be interested. They may not be for sale. You might just reach out to them and say, hey, I'm looking for this type of business, looking for something that's between X and X revenue in this part of the world, in this type of business. And it's a numbers game. You're basically sending out letters and emails to people and hoping that one of them bites. The route
Wow.
I went down was there are basically estate agents for selling businesses, and they're business brokers or corporate finance teams. So then it was
Hmm.
just about finding the right people and the deals. And the biggest part of my search journey was connecting with brokers and corporate finance teams to say, this is the type of business I'm looking for. Do you have anything? Do you know anyone? And
Hmm.
once I'd got into the network, you got introduced to more people, they get introduced to more people. And then the business that I found and ultimately ended up acquiring was through a broker, through an introduction to a corporate finance person that I knew. And then it's just all about meeting the people, the founders who I acquired off. They're both still in the business, which was really important to me from a transition planning perspective. They were both really nice, very aligned on values and what they wanted to do. It was very important that I think they had a couple of other offers from larger companies who were looking to acquire them into bigger businesses. They were worried about their team. They were worried about what that meant for their culture. So actually, what I was looking for and what they were looking for were actually very aligned, which was good. And we went from, I think, first meeting to signing heads of terms in about 6 weeks, and then about another 3 months later, we'd gone through due diligence and closed on the 1st of September 2024. So it was all when I'd found the business, it was quite quick.
Yeah.
It moved quite quick.
That's really fascinating. You mentioned sort of corporate finances and brokers and things like that. excuse my ignorance, but that sounds expensive and complicated. Is that the case, or is it actually simpler than it sounds?
Like all these things, I think people like to make it sound more complicated than it is through acronyms and things. I mean, the business. So, as someone who is trying to buy a business, there's no cost to you to go and approach business brokers. The brokers get paid for by the seller, like you would when you were
Right.
selling a house. Now,
Okay.
there are companies that specialize in finding deals for you, and they will charge you a fee. I didn't go down that route for a number of reasons, but you can pay to shortcut parts of the process. There is a expense to it. I was fortunate, and the way I planned it was I kept my job, so I had an income stream while I was doing this. Some people quit their jobs and just focus
Mm.
only on the search. If you go down that route, there is then obviously a time pressure and a money pressure, which then there is a cost to that. Um, the other part of the cost is through due diligence. So again, similar to buying a house, you can pay for solicitors' fees, you can do all your searches, but the house isn't yours until the day you close. So all that money can be lost. So there is a potential sunk cost. So legal
Mm.
fees and due diligence fees with accountants, but most of them are structured in a way that if the deal fell through, they rebate you a third, they keep a third, and then they offset a third for a future deal. So, but that was anyone thinking about going into this, and there is a growing social media presence, and people like Cody Sanchez on one side of things are great because they're raising awareness of this type of thing, but on the other side they make it sound very easy and you don't have to put any
Mm.
money down. If someone's telling you you can buy a business for no money down, they're lying, and there's probably something underneath it where they want you to go to some masterclass and pay 5 grand to learn how to do it. I'm
Yeah.
quite deep into this community now, and I have never spoken to anyone where there wasn't some kind of skin in the game or risk reward. Even if it feels like you're not putting a lot of money in, there will be risk in the deal somewhere. And I think, if someone is telling you otherwise, I would not believe them.
Yeah, it's important to do your research then
Yes,
at
it
the
is.
beginning of that
Yeah.
process and got not get sold some snake oil
Yes.
in the process. You mentioned earlier around criteria as well. So this location, this revenue bracket or whatever it was. But for you and your focus on values and culture, did you have a type of business and I don't know, characteristics of a business owner that you would want? And did that apply to the search?
Yeah, it did. So the both the books I referenced earlier, they talk about like a buying box. So like it's basically a 2 by 2 matrix of what are the things that are important to you. So there's the more nuts and bolts of how big do you want the business to be, what do you want the revenue to look like, how much net profit do you want it to make. For me, location was quite an important one. My family are established in London. My kids go to school in London. I didn't want to be driving up and down the motorway. I found a couple of nice businesses in kind of towards Bolton, Lancashire. My family's from Leeds. I know how
Mm.
arduous that drive is, and it might look like a great business, but if you're up and down the M1 every other week, it's going to get like boring pretty fast. So I had
Yeah.
a pretty clear view of I wanted to be within an hour's drive of my house. I wanted it to be a certain range in terms of scale and size because of how I could afford to fund the deal. And then there was the softer side of things of I wanted it to be a people-based business. So I decided very quickly that there's kind of three main areas that I looked at. There was manufacturing type businesses, there was product and distribution businesses, and there were service-based businesses. So given my background in consulting, I just felt much more comfortable with a service-based business. I understand how the money moves. I understand how you win your business. I have a network in that space. Traditionally, most people who go down this route will acquire like quote unquote a blue collar business. So HVAC type businesses, manufacturing businesses, property maintenance type businesses are very popular. I went slightly different and went with a white collar business in a consulting environment. And the reason I did that was I felt like I could add value very quickly based on my experience, based on my contacts, and based on
Mm.
just being in that world for a long time. But it was really important to me that the business I acquired was people focused, that it had a strong identity of being people focused, so that it was known for doing good work with people and built trust through doing good work. And then when I met the founders, it was very clear that their values aligned to mine. Now, I met a couple of people who said all the right things, but then when you push them a little bit further, you realize that what they were saying and what their actual true beliefs were very different. And I kind of qualified myself out of a few of those because I got some very good advice early on that if either the deal looks too good to be true or the people you meet don't seem right, your gut is probably telling you something, and it'll only unwind further down the line. And it might unwind 3 years down the line where you uncover something that's happened. But trying to find
Mm,
people that were principled and had, the business I acquired had been running for 25 years successfully, it had gone through multiple recessions. So all the characteristics of a business that can do that, great
yeah.
clients that, repeat business. It's not recurring revenue, but it's reoccurring. So we have clients that have been with us for 24 years who continuously buy from us. And to me, that was a really nice sign that the company was doing something right. The people were credible and good. And most of our staff have been with us for more than 10 years. And again, that's a nice
Mm,
sign that people enjoy coming to work
yeah.
and enjoy doing the work that they're doing. So all those bits put together, I didn't have like a criteria of this has to be a very cultural, strong business, because I don't think you know that until you actually get in the business. But I've
Yeah.
been very happily surprised that all the things that the founders said were true are true. Now, that doesn't
Yeah.
mean that it's true every single day, obviously, because, people are people and it
Yeah.
can be messy at
We all
times,
have
but
bad days.
we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really great to hear. I think you've clearly got a set of skills, set of values that you're really clear on, which is helpful when you're on that search for acquiring a business. But if someone out there is looking to do this and perhaps how important it is, would you say, to get clear on what their skills are and the value that they could bring to that business before they go on that search? Um, because you don't want to go through that process and then go, oh, actually, I can't make this better, or I can't sustain this business as it was before. Because yeah, you clearly knew what you were looking for and what your value is. But yeah, how important would that be? I think to do some self evaluation.
It's so important. And I think not just self-evaluation, but speak to people that you trust. Or I spoke to a couple of clients that I'd worked with very closely, or colleagues, and said, when I worked with you, what would you say my superpower was? Or what did you enjoy working about me? Where did you think that I added the most value? And some of that I knew, and some of it you got reflected back at you, and also bits that you thought you were maybe strong at, actually, that you weren't maybe as strong as you perceived you were. So that was really important for me because, for example, I knew that um, I want any business that I acquired, I was okay with it being not necessarily operationally excellent. But I knew I could bring that. I knew I could bring rigor and process and a level of standards that I just was drilled into me as a management consultant for a long period of time. If it had been a very operationally strong business, but let's say, marketing is not a particularly strong suit of mine, I've not got a huge amount of exposure into it. If the biggest problem had been marketing, but it operationally ran, I would have been able to add less value, and probably similar on the sales side of things. So I've got a very strong network in the work that we do. So it's been very easy for me to pick up the phone to people who are ex-clients or ex-colleagues and say, this is what I'm doing now. Would you be interested in the conversation? Because that trust-based sell is so important. I just believe it so strongly, particularly for consulting businesses. If you can't kind of back up what you've sold, it unravels very quickly. And I didn't know I could add a huge amount of value to a product manufacturer. I don't have an engineering background. I've never built something. I mean, if you ask my wife, I'm not particularly, handy around the house. So doing anything around that side of things would have probably been less valuable. So I made
Yeah.
that decision very clearly in my mind that for the first time I'm doing this, I wanted to add as much value as possible and do that as quickly as possible, but keep it core to my skill set. And if I hadn't have done that, I know people who haven't done that, and they found it very difficult. A lot of people who do this journey come from investment banking or from small venture capital type firms, so they've got all the financial experience. They know how to do a deal, but then when they get into the nuts and bolts of running a business, people, working with people and managing people and the people issues is the consistent thing when I talk to my
Yeah.
peer group who have done this, that comes up all the time. And if you don't have the experience of that side of things also, you're going to
Yeah.
get a little bit of a shock when you acquire a business with 50 people, 30 of them are in a factory somewhere, 20 of them are out selling. And how do you manage that team when you've never even had exposure to managing a team sat in an
Yeah.
office together?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I think people not undervalue, but I think overlook sometimes that the time and the need the investment that needs to go into looking after the people who will then look after the business rather than
Yeah.
doing it the other way around. So you've acquired this business. You're doing. What was that transition then for the people in that business? Because suddenly, this new guy's come in, bought the business. Ta-da! Nice
Yeah.
to meet you. What what was that reaction? Was there a handover period? Any challenges as well?
Yeah. So we closed on the Friday the first. It was a Saturday, and on the Monday there'd already been a team meeting in the calendar where everyone was coming in person, and only one other person in the business knew that the acquisition was happening, who is the finance director who helped through the acquisition process for the sellers. So the founders rang everyone and just let them know there was an acquisition had happened, and you were going to meet the new owner on Monday, and then I got to meet the team very quickly, and it gave me the opportunity just to be very, open with them about what my intention were. There was definitely nervousness about what I was going to do with the business, and you hear in the stories of people coming in and
Yeah.
just firing people or asset stripping the businesses, and I was just very clear with them, like I had been with the founders at the start. My intention is to grow this business, but grow it in a sustainable way, to take all the best bits of the core foundations that have been built over 25 years and then apply my skill set and knowledge to grow it and open up my network to be able to do that. But it wasn't fundamentally shifting the business, changing it. It was really about giving it its next evolution. So once I think I've had that conversation, and I was very open about my journey, both personally and professionally, my family life, my kids. And I think that hopefully that helped to break down some of the barriers and the nervousness. And then I spent
Yeah.
a lot of time with individuals in the team talking about, one, trying to learn about what they did day to day and the challenges they were having. Because I saw it as a really good opportunity for me to um, take some quick wins if people were struggling with certain things that were aligned to the growth strategy. It meant that I could prioritize those things. One thing I definitely found, having been a consultant, you get brought in to solve a problem. So everyone is like behind the problem, and things move very quickly because you just are asked to move very quickly. When it's your own business, I definitely learned some lessons about moving too quickly rather
Okay.
than pausing and reflecting and listening a little bit more. There was nothing, major and drastic, but there was definitely some areas where I probably should have paused and listened and then just taken a bit more time. Whereas my natural inclination is for actions where I wanted to do things which I've had to unwind through no major detriment to anyone or any client or anything internally. Um, but yeah, that was definitely a learning curve. Everything takes longer than you think. Everything takes at least 3 months, and even with the best will and the people, it definitely takes that amount of time. So I've had to be a bit more patient.
Yeah.
Um, other challenges is you know trying to move the business in a growth direction without over pressurizing the current team because they're out delivering and doing stuff every single day, and trying to find that balance between sustainable growth and finding the right clients and doing good work, but not pressurizing the team too much. That's a constant consulting dynamic I find. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to hire, particularly in the environment now with hiring people, you don't want to overhire, you don't want to underhire. We have a fantastic partner network and associate network, so we can flex and change quite quickly, but we've got a great core team. And that was really important to me as well, particularly in a business like ours, that we did have a really strong core team that could grow and wanted to grow. And I think I've been really pleased about how many people have been very open about they were nervous, but they understand where we're going. They're bought into the journey. They see this as a next turn for them in their careers. So
Mm.
that's been really nice.
That's brilliant to hear. Just going back to what we touched on at the beginning then about the importance of leaders communicating the purpose and the vision to their team continuously. So is that something that you've been actively doing there over the last year as well to bring them along for the journey?
Yeah, yes, I've tried to, and sometimes it's when I was a consultant, it's very easy to go in and tell people, what's wrong with their business or the things that they should change, and then you probably don't do it to your own company. And I've definitely found that at times. I talk to clients all the time around how important it is to communicate clearly and have a vision and have a very clear plan. I'm running a workshop next week with an executive team on team dynamics and communication and building a team charter so they can align to a vision. We've done that in our own business, but sometimes it falls by the wayside. Again, if I mentioned at the start, you have
Yeah.
to be very conscious about doing these things, doing them in the right way. I've got a very clear vision for what I want this business to be, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. And that's what I've said to the team. This is not a put this on steroids in a year's time, we're going to triple revenue. This is over the next 5 to 10 years, this is my ambition of the business. And this is how I see we get there. And this is where I'm going to
Yeah.
need your help and support. And one thing I've definitely learned as a new business owner in reality is, in your corporate career, you get paid regardless of the effort you put in, really. You'll probably get found out sooner or
That's one of the
later.
benefits. One of the benefits.
It
Yeah.
is. My job now is one of the hardest challenges I found is where do I focus my time and attention to meet that goal? Because it's very easy to revert to, I've got a very specific task to do, and you kind of get lost in the detail and you can spend hours and hours and hours doing something. Whereas
Mm.
taking a step back and going, actually, if my vision looks like this, that might be not going to happen for 3 years, but what's the next step I can take for the next 12 months? And what does that look like? So we've been very conscious as a business of very clear quarterly metrics that we use, yearly metrics. We track our forward-looking metrics on a weekly basis. Everyone is accountable for that. And that's been a learning curve as well from all of us in the business about what do we care about? What do we track? How do those things that we track actually make our business better, and how do they help us achieve that goal? And then I think it's about iteration, because I could set a vision and a goal for this business that everyone just doesn't buy into, and on the face of it, they nod at you and they say, actually, I just don't believe that. So getting the feedback from the team as well, saying, does this resonate? Do you understand why we're trying to do this? Is this too big a stretch? One of our board advisors said to me at the start, he said, you've got to be careful that you don't break people's reality string. If you said, we're going to 10x this business in a year's time, they would
Lost
probably,
everyone.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just lost everyone, and they probably wouldn't say anything, but they just don't
Mm.
see how you get there. And I think that's one thing I've definitely learned is having the vision is important, but then it's taking people on the journey of how you get there, and then
Yeah.
reflecting back and going, we did a rebrand um, a year after the acquisition, new website. And that was really important for me to feel like I had ownership of the business
Yeah.
in that transition year. But it was pulled from a culmination of the whole team inputting into what we wanted this to look like, how we wanted to talk about ourselves, the things that were important to us. Spoke to a number of clients who echoed back, this is why we work with you. So we tried to replay that and just make it feel like it was my business, but also a representation of the whole business,
Yeah.
which took time. That was one of the things that on paper I felt like I could do quite quickly, but in reality it
Yeah.
took a year.
Yeah, yeah, you think it is a quick process, and it probably would be if you were the only person
Yeah.
you were, consulting on it, but that's a really important point, like, you wanna come in and repackage that so it's your new adventure, and that's a very personal thing, but if you'd done that without the buy-in of the team, then that whole conversation you had on entering would have just, yeah, been irrelevant because 'cause they're like,
Yeah.
he's just taken over,"
Yeah.
and that's the end of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's any other challenges that you've encountered in terms of skill set? So being a consultant, you clearly knew where your skills and where you could add value, which is why you looked for that type of business. But is there anything that's been a surprise to you in terms of now being a business owner? Um, and anything else you've had to learn really quickly?
Great question. There's loads that I've had to learn really quickly. Um, I think that one of the things that I've learned is if you can, I think for the first time in my career, I didn't have like a wider network of team around me. So sometimes it felt quite lonely when I wanted this job as the CEO, but then there were times where you think, oh, it would be really nice just to, have a boss where I could just pick up the phone and say, this isn't actually my decision. So I've created a network of advisors around me who I utilize for that type of thing. I think the biggest challenge was thinking about, if the vision looks like this and this is how we want to scale the business, what are the skill sets that I need that complement my skill sets? Otherwise, I'm going to end up trying to dip into everything, because my natural inclination is I'm not a micromanager, but when I see something, my natural inclination is to try and fix it. And
Fix
a
it.
big
Fix it
part of my
now.
learning curve,
Yeah.
a big part of my learning curve with this is like just taking a step
Yeah.
back and making sure people are own and accountable for things. That the
Mm.
work that we do with clients is outstanding. So that part of the business is like, when I go watch our facilitators, or I see the outputs from our research team, I'm always blown away by the feedback from the clients. And I went and co-facilitated a couple just to really get into the weeds of what we do. And it's
Mm.
made me have a massive appreciation of how difficult that is as a skill, but also it's made me realize I actually really, really enjoy it. And it's something I'm starting to do more and more of with some of our larger clients. But for me, the biggest challenge was, how do you take the business and create a level of operational excellence so you can scale it? Because if I turned on the tap for new business too big, in the next, probably over the last 3 or 4 months, operationally, we might have struggled and how to fulfill it. So one of the key hires I made was bringing in a head of operations, and her responsibility is to make sure the business runs smoothly through all our processes. So we spent a lot of time as a business understanding the handoff points between different parts of the business, where there are pain points. Again, if I put my consulting hat on and came into the business, it would have made a lot of sense. But sometimes taking that step back as a team and going, oh, there's a bit of a problem here when we do a handoff between a sale that's been won on our delivery team, and it's
Mm.
just a communication challenge. It's not like there's any problem. It's just a communication gap. So identifying those bits has meant we've been really clear as a team on accountabilities and roles and responsibilities. And I think, because we're still quite a small business in reality, we're like 15 people plus kind of 20 associates, um, people are really inclined to lean in and help, which is an amazing attribute for the business. And finding that balance between leaning in but overstepping, or doing something,
Mm.
or not doing something that you're accountable for, but doing that in a way which everyone is very clear about, because people are doing it with best intents always, but it does cause some ambiguity. So trying to find that balance between process and over process is a
Mm.
constant challenge for a business of our size, because if you put too much process in
Yeah.
place, you lose some of the
The
flexibility.
creativity as
Yeah,
well. Creativity as well gets lost a little bit, and autonomy and problem solving skills kind of go out the window
they do.
if it's too ingrained. Yeah, absolutely. Because of what you do as a business, I'm assuming it's going to be really important for you to keep those culture, values, people focused, focus on the business. So, can you talk to me like a 5-year-old? What does the business actually do? What do you do when you go into businesses, and what do they need from you? What are the conversations?
So it varies. A lot of them start with culture. So a lot of them start with, how do we create a culture, and whether that's a service-based business, whether it's a consulting business, where um, that everyone understands what the culture actually means. And what that normally means is a set of values that they want people to understand, and behaviors they want people to live by. And then what normally happens is that shows a number of either capability gaps in the skill sets of their people, or capability gaps in the systems that they use to run their business. Our
Mm.
real focus is about, how do you get the best out of the people that you have, and how do you give them the skills and behaviors and embedded learning to be excellent at their jobs, and then they provide the differentiation. So it really, if I was explaining to, as a 5-year-old, we support and facilitate teaching adults how to be better at their jobs. And some of it is a little bit like, we don't like to use the word teach because we're not a school, we're not educating people. This is about
Mm.
facilitating and coaching very, capable people to be even better at what they do. And for every
Yeah.
business, that's slightly different. And one of the things that we, genuinely, I think, differentiate on is we probably spend a disproportionate amount of time. Well, it's not disproportionate. We think we spend the right proportion of time with our clients, understanding the nuances of their business, the industry, the specific people, their personality sets, which then means we can create learning and development opportunities and programs that are not, generic. They are, for Jess, because we've understood her personality profile. We understand this is her role. We understand this is the values and the culture of the company, which is where it normally starts. And then
Yeah.
how do we facilitate learning experiences that are going to make you better at your job? And that's not a one and done e-learning. It's not necessarily even a one and done workshop. It's about continuously embedding those skills and behaviors, which is really not like, it's really amazing to see the difference that it can make individually. I personally remember um, the company I worked for, the first company at Capco, they really invested in their people. And I was very fortunate to go on 3 talent development programs as I got more senior in my job. And they're probably still some of the most pivotal parts in my career, where I got to take time out of the business. I identified areas of weakness, and then I got to work with really skilled people to get better. And when we go and do that work, and when I go and see it or talk to the people afterwards, it's really kind of inspiring what some of our team are able to do in a pretty short period of time. And it's really nice working with businesses who, share our belief that people are the most important part of your business. Like, someone said something to me the other day, is every business is just basically a recruitment business. Your job is to find the
Mm.
best people. And I was like,
Yeah.
actually, that's true. But then once you've recruited them, how much time do you actually spend making them better, or making
Yeah.
sure they understand what they have to do? Or, if you look after those people and you help them grow, your business will grow. I just have
Yeah.
such a fundamental belief on it. And, we're in difficult times. Like, L&D spend is discretionary. And that's
Yeah.
a challenge. That's a challenge for us as a business, and for a lot of service-based businesses, is um,
Mm.
you have to have a very strong culture and people within the business who are willing to advocate to spend time and effort and money on people development. So we like to partner with those companies because, once you
Yeah.
find them, you normally create a true partnership over a number of years, where you help their business evolve and change and grow. And they're the type of people we like working with.
I love that. And you're right. I think it is a case of, yeah, every business is a recruitment business, but I think businesses miss that. Then they spend a lot of time, effort, money getting the right people in the right seats. And really, those people, the best people, will want to be continuously learning and growing
Yeah.
in their role. And if they're just left stagnant to do that day in, day out, they will leave eventually. They will get
100%.
bored
Yeah.
and leave. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really, really important. And the best businesses and organizations will know that and will invest in L&D, and that those ones that will rise through the ranks, I think. So it's a really
Yeah.
important point, definitely.
Yeah, it is. And I think, we are living in a very strange time at the moment, where the world is changing so fast, and the skill set gap is just growing and growing every day. We do quite a lot of work with companies around, we are not a technology focused business, but we are very conscious that things like AI are fundamentally changing the way people work. And we are
Hmm.
supporting a lot of businesses on that transition around, how do you utilize some of these tools? And they're actually there from an efficiency perspective to make you better at your job. So again, our very clear viewpoint on it is that your people are your biggest your human advantage is
Yeah,
real. Because when
100%.
technology is commodity, it's like you are a race to the bottom, to just, from a price perspective, and no one wants to be there. And, people are getting, like, they're quite worried and scared about what does it actually mean. And
Yeah.
I feel that as a small business owner, thinking about, I need to do something, want to make sure my people understand the technology that we're using and the skills that they didn't even know they needed 2 years ago. fundamentally changing. So it's a very interesting time for us as a business and as an industry,
Mm,
because people are definitely craving that learning. They're trying to make it contextual to their business because there's so much information out there, it is overwhelming. And then trying to make it specific to you is a real challenge. So
yeah.
interesting challenge, but definitely a challenge.
Definitely. Yeah, 100%. And I'm having a lot of conversations myself at the moment around like, don't fear AI. It's to help you. It's not going to replace your job because you still need to know how to use it in an efficient way to get what you need.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of fear around it.
There is for sure, and
Yeah.
information overload and paralysis around actually how to. And then you go on YouTube or LinkedIn at any moment in time, and there's a 22-year-old showing you how he just built a brand new business from scratch with AI agents, and a little part of me a little part of me wants to throw my phone at the wall, and a little part of me just chuckles and goes, "You've never been in a business that was running at the same time as when you're trying to implement this type of change." And to me, it all comes down to that change resilience. And
Yeah.
um, there's a I like the starting simple, starting smart, and starting specific. I think that's what I would say to people when I was a consultant: is pick a problem
Yeah.
is an issue. Find the smallest thing you can make a change, and then just keep doing it. This is not ever going to be finished thing. AI is not going to be a project that you do. It's going to be something that evolves into your business over a long period of time. And it's about just starting and doing something. I think people are super worried about the tool that they pick or the application of it, or are they so far behind already that they can't even catch up? And none of those things are true,
No.
but we get fed that quite a lot. And a lot of it is trying to work with those businesses and say, you are AI is never going to get worse from today. So there's never a better time to start than today. And it's just starting small and finding the thing that resonates, and trying to empower you with the skills so you can self-learn. Because
Yeah.
once you've got to that level of a baseline, you can then there are
Yeah.
things you can actually do to move your skill set forward. So yeah, it's I feel
100%.
that
Yeah.
I feel the fear.
Yeah, I feel the fear. I do. I think I mean there's a lot going round at the moment as the AI bubble will burst
Mm.
soon and we'll all and it's just not true. But I think teaching and I don't think you can teach it, but you can encourage it and enhance it. The skill of being curious, is
Mm.
there something out there that can help me do my job better or more efficiently, or I've got this slight issue with, I don't know, spelling and grammar. For instance, is there something just getting curious about
Yeah,
what else is out there that can help me and asking the right questions, isn't it?
it is, yeah.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So you've gone and acquired a business to have more time back and a bit more of a work-life balance and spend more time with the family at home. Has that happened?
It has.
Yeah.
But it's so when I was in my previous jobs, my diary was filled from 7:30, 8 o'clock until 6, 7 o'clock in various increments of half an hour probably. And I had a very clear view ahead of what my year looked like, and because of the type of businesses that we were. So it was just reality looking back. It was like you thought you were doing a good job and you were trying to make things work, but you were just really looking forward to your next 2-week holiday where you could try and relax. But at the level of seniority I was, you kind of expected to work,
Be
or
on your
it would be
phone.
too
Yeah.
stressful. Yeah, it'd be too stressful to go back to the amount of messages and emails.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely one of the things I was looking for was a bit more control. Now, to me, that was more about flexibility. So I probably work the same amount, but I have the ability to work how I want. And that's been the biggest thing. So I'm a very morning person. I really like taking the kids to school and picking them up. So, 2, 3 times a week, I get up early before everyone else does. I do a couple of hours work. It means that by the time the kids wake up, I can make them breakfast and I'm fully present. And that was the biggest thing, Jess, was
Yeah.
it wasn't about necessarily the time. It was about being present with them, because it was kind of stolen moments. You're always on your phone. You were always on a phone call. Like my daughter came to she's 4 now, but she was 3 when she came to our office. And um, she asked me afterwards, she was like, "Why do she was like, "All you do is talk, and you seem like you get angry at people on a screen all day." And I was like, it was such a like a little stab in the, like, oh my, like that's her perception of daddy, is like he's on his phone all the time. He's never really available, was always in a meeting, he's traveling around the world. And they grow up, I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but they do really grow up so fast, and I didn't want their
Yeah.
perception of me to be that. So I've definitely found I'm more present. I don't have email on my phone anymore. I may have to do that at a point in time, but that was like a bit of an non-negotiable for me. My phone goes away at bedtime. The business just runs a little bit slower than I'm used to, but in a good way.
Yeah.
So I have genuinely been able to find that work-life balance, but it's also come with a different type of, balance and stress, because I wake up and I'm thinking about the business, because now I'm the custodian of the business, and I'm responsible for lots of people's jobs and clients and deliverables. And you've always got this little idea in the back of your mind about things you could do.
Yeah.
Whereas in my more corporate jobs, I'm pretty good at like disconnecting those two things. So although the stress was there, I was able to kind of push it to one side as and when I needed to. Um, so it's not like a stress free. I mean, probably better than I do. Like, running your own business is a stressful thing for lots of different reasons.
Mm.
And that's the thing I'm still kind of genuinely working through, is not feeling guilty for picking my kids up from school at 3 o'clock. I don't have to tell anyone I'm doing it. I don't have to ask anyone's permission. Obviously respectful of the team to let them know that I'm not around. But yeah, still definitely getting into that. It's, you spend 15 years being programmed to operate in a certain way. And then when you're not in that environment and no one's asking you to do it, there is an inclination to fall back into, oh, I need meetings in my diary because that's what busy looks like. And I need to be working until 5 o'clock. And it's like, well, who told you that 5 o'clock is the time? Like, sometimes I finish at 2 to sort the kids out or go to the gym, but then I might start work again at 7 till 9 because my energy's in a different place. And that's been really nice, just to have a pattern of work which is a bit more fluid and flexible. I'm awful at like 2 or 3 o'clock. In my energy just goes, and that's when I like to go to the gym or go for a walk or just do something completely different. So having that flexibility has been really nice.
It's a wonderful thing, that, isn't it? To go with the energy of your brain and your body and work to that rhythm, rather than
Yeah.
I have to perform at these times. If you
Yeah.
actually, I need a little bit of fresh air, or I need to go and like work some rage out with at a boxing
Yeah.
class or something, and then come back to it,
Yeah.
rather than have to be on somebody else's time scale, is really wonderful. Do you think, would that be your measure of success these days, compared to, I know, in your 20s, chasing the titles and the money and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I think so. And, very, very personal thing, but actually it's the more people I speak to about it, maybe it's just the people I kind of associate with are all going through something similar, late 30s, early 40s, that I
Mm.
don't know whether it's a midlife. I don't know whether I bought a business because of a midlife crisis, to be honest.
It's
I
better
didn't,
than a Ferrari.
it
You're
is,
doing
it
good, yeah.
is. Yeah, but I know I was talking to someone yesterday, and for me, this was about, I want to be able to do this or something like this until, the day that I'm not around anymore. I've seen people who sell businesses quite early or quite young relatively, and although it looks great, they get really bored, they get unstimulated, they age very fast. And what I'm looking for is that job or an environment where I can do this for a long period of time because I enjoy it. It provides some like a good income, but also thinking about, the experience I want to have with my family and my children, and what I want them to take away from this,
Mm,
in terms of, you can do this and also be as present as possible. So that, yeah, it probably is I've got a different measure of success now, and that's
yeah.
evolving all the time, actually, as I learn a little bit more about the big business and go through a stressful cycle and then go through a good cycle and then working out what the new normal the new normal is, but still
Mm,
really ambitious. I want this company to grow in various different ways, and I'm still fairly youngish in my career, although, the grey parts of my beard may tell you otherwise. And I'm very excited about what that looks like, and kind of going on that journey now with my family and the other people around me. Because one thing I have found is the network that I built over a long period of time have been so supportive. And that's been really nice because it makes you feel like um, the things that you've done over a period of time are actually genuine and people enjoy working with you. Um, and people have been very open and transparent and generous with their time, which has
Mm.
been which has been a really nice part of the journey as well.
I think generally you do find that people are, people are, if you ask for help or you ask for support or feedback, people generally are willing to give it to you in a constructive way. And it is important to surround yourself with those people because it can be a very lonely place when it's just
Mm,
you
yeah,
responsible for something. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I know it's getting to that time where where it's mid-afternoon and you probably want to get to the gym and get some fresh air. But couple more questions.
Sure.
The corporate sort of career journey trajectory, like I kind of come into it from a different angle. So I ran my own business early, young, and then I've sort of transferred into the corporate environment via consulting. So I'm doing it backwards. And I do resonate with what you're saying around the fast pace, fixing things quick, moving on to the next problem. Um, and I do envisage a time where I'm actually going to have that conversation as well around, slowing down a bit and not being so on it. But for those people who are in that rat race, for want of a better term at the moment, maybe late 30s, just going into 40s, as you said, and they feel a bit stuck. Maybe it's not the right, maybe they're not thinking I need to buy a business and go and do something.
Yeah.
But what would be um the thing that they should be asking themselves to figure out if that is a long-term choice for them in that corporate environment or whether they should be looking at something
Yeah,
different?
it's a really difficult one because you made a really nice point at the start of the conversation, which was for me, the risk of not doing something felt riskier than the risk of doing something. Um, but for quite a lot of people, that's not the case for lots of very practical reasons, like mortgages and kids in school and stability.
Mm.
The economic environment we're in at the moment is not overly favorable for people taking risks. And
Yeah.
I suppose what I would say to people or encourage people, and I get a load of people who reach out to me and say, you've gone on this journey. What advice would you give? I think it's about doing it for the right reasons. I spent a lot of time thinking about what it was that made me happy. And if I think about the best parts of because I love my corporate career, like I genuinely really enjoyed it until the last 2 years. But what it made me think about was the best bits I enjoyed were working on complex problems with people, being surrounded by people who were energized, had a growth mindset. Um, so I was like, if I can find that, if I can bottle that and be accountable for it, then that's something that I want to do. Now, that level of accountability or ownership is not for everyone. I think that's absolutely fine. I think it's more about trying to find the thing that you enjoy doing. um, I'm not. I don't know. I don't know if have I ever spoken to anyone who's loves their job every single day. Even on the face of it, if
Ah.
someone looks like they have the best job in the world,
Mm.
there are trade offs,
Yeah.
and I think it's just being about honest about that. Some people are really happy just doing their 9 to 5 and then spending their free time like with a family or fishing or whatever it is, the thing that you really enjoy. That's a super credible
Yeah.
and fine thing to do. It's the bit that I struggled with was you know if you are striving to continue to develop, how can you do that in a way which doesn't mean that you're completely tied to this corporate chain until you're 65
Yeah.
or older, probably now with the way kind of the
Mm.
economy's going. So that was my kind of the freedom element of it was
Yeah.
more important to me. But it's a very personal journey, and I would say it's just about maybe reflecting and talking to people, or like I said, the unlock for me was realizing I could go and buy a business. If I'd have never scratched that itch or reached out to that person, I would have probably just gone and got another job and probably been okay, and that would have been fine, but I wouldn't have solved the actual problem that I was trying to solve.
Yeah. And you're a problem solver, aren't you? At heart, that's what you do. So that makes sense. Yeah,
Try. Yeah.
absolutely. I do think that you need to have a certain mindset or at least a continuous wanting to learn and to improve that mindset and have the energy levels to do what you do for what you do, and lots of business owners we've spoken to. So as a final closing question, if you had an alchemy formula for success, I'm going to go back to alchemy, name of the podcast. What are the ingredients you would need to have, do you think, or what the ingredients you couldn't do without, in terms of either your skill set or your mindset, or along those lines?
Oh, a great question. I think there's a couple of things. Yeah, I mean, I kind of refer to them as like non-negotiables in my mind. I think one of them you've already nailed, is about having that growth mindset or just being inquisitive. I think being like an energizer, not in the sense of like an energizer bunny, but someone who gives energy and doesn't like suck energy out of a situation, I think is
Yeah,
just so undervalued, particularly in a team environment. And then one thing that I think is just so underrated, and actually I've seen very few people actually do this consistently, is doing what you say you're going to do and
yeah,
doing it to a good level of quality. It
yeah,
that to me is like, if people just did that, the work world particularly would be a much better place and a much easier place to be. And I think just trying to be, being genuine is a very broad term. But I find when I'm open and a bit vulnerable, which can be difficult
yeah,
at times, I always get a net positive from it rather than the other
yeah,
way around. So I'd say kind of those four things I try and think about in my personal life, that growth mindset of always kind of wanting to learn or just being inquisitive about stuff, doing what I say
yeah.
I'm going to do to a decent level of quality, like being a net energizer rather than a
Energy
energizer
vampire.
and a
Energy
vampire. Yeah,
vampire. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, we've all known one of
yeah.
those.
We do. Yeah.
I think those are, spot on. I would totally agree with all of those. And I think the best leaders that I've met or that I've worked with embody all of that. And on the vulnerability element as well, I think that is really important. There is sometimes a culture in certain size organizations that the leader kind of locks themselves away. They're on the sixth
Mm.
floor in a glass room. You have to book an appointment to see them. And I think the best ones are the ones that do what you did when you entered that business. This is why I'm doing it. This is the challenges I'm having through my life. This is why I'm doing it. This is what I want to do. And being open and honest with who you're working with. And like you said, people tend to respond in a
Yeah, they
positive
do.
way rather than it being all secrets behind closed doors. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I think finding
100%.
that balance between I'm not I don't love the phrase like bring your whole self to work, because there are parts of
There are
me that I
boundaries.
don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are boundaries, and
Yeah.
I think it's finding that boundary, and some of it depends
Yeah.
on the culture and the people, but
Yeah.
doing it in a genuine way to the level you're comfortable with. I found personally it works, because when you're in those difficult situations, and if someone just understands a little bit more about you, they tend to trust you a little bit more.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's kind of where we're trying to get to, I suppose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Toby. I think I've learnt a lot today, and I hope you've had a nice time.
I have. It's been great. It's been
um,
really good conversation.
but some brilliant nuggets to take away from that. Before we leave you, where can people find you? Are here's your marketing test now. Where are you on socials?
Oh
How can
god.
people get in touch?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm quite active. I'll try to be quite active on LinkedIn. So Toby Henry on LinkedIn. Acceleratorsolutions.com is our website. So if you want to go see kind of what we do and interested in that, would love to hear from you. And my email address is tobyh@acceleratorsolutions.com. And always interested, keen to connect with people and hear what people's thoughts are, whether that's on the acquisition journey or kind of what we do now. I think it's all about to kind of build that network and helping people along the journey, because I listened to podcasts like this when I was on my journey, and I found people and reached out to them. They were super open with their time. And I think that's one thing that I try and give back, is if someone reaches out to me in a genuine, credible way and is asking for advice or information, then
Hmm.
They'll always try and do it. So
I'm sure you'll get tons and tons of questions around that acquisition. So yeah, thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. And go off and get some fresh air now. You deserve it.
Yes, I will do. Even though it's raining outside, I'll do my best.
Have fun.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jess.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Brand Scale. Look out for another episode dropping very, very soon.